Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to our community. It's so good to be with you here again and with my special guest here, Pastor Art Georges from Living Hope Community Church in Bartonville, Illinois. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. So why don't you tell everybody out there in I've Decided Land and everywhere else who's watching this podcast who Art Georges is and what you're all about.
Okay, well, be careful. It's the Bible says, "Let another's lips praise you, and not yourself." So I don't. But I've been pastoring Living Hope Community Church in Bartonville since its inception. We planted with a group from Bethany Baptist back in 2003. I was an actuary, a numbers person of the insurance industry up until I was about 37 and went off to seminary and got my Master's of Divinity from a seminary out in Southern California, and then came back and planted the church. So
that was almost 20 years ago, right?
Yeah. Since then, I was able to complete a Doctor of Ministry from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville in 2018. But yeah, it's been a great opportunity to see the Lord work through a church plant in Bartonville, and I've been thankful.
Yep. Well, and I can say that I'm a proud member of your congregation and your church, and this is a special time for me to be able to sit here and share this time. So I appreciate you coming and joining us today and helping us with our weekly winning word, and just share some of your perspective. When I saw the word and I started to think about it, you're the first person that came to mind.
Wow,
so I always try to think about who can help talk about this, and
that's gratifying. Thank you.
And it's because of a sermon series that you went through recently at church through the book of Ecclesiastes, and that those thoughts started just coming back to my mind. I was like, this would be great if I could get Pastor Art to join me, because I know that there's some alignment here.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think it's helpful. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad to be able to be here.
Great. All right. Well, we're going to talk about the weekly winning word, and those out there in the I've Decided community know all about that. So every week it's a different subject, and we're just going to dig into it and try to take something, hopefully provide some good content to folks out there that can help them be more successful in their professional life. And the word is meaningful. And just to kind of set a foundation for it, the definition for meaningful is useful, purposeful, and significant.
Yes.
And I thought it was really interesting in the article that Kim wrote, how she framed it up around this, having this meaningful perspective through your work, right? Or having some opportunities through your work to be more meaningful, right? And be productive in that way. Right. And she wrote an article that posed 4 questions, right, that are going to hopefully help us determine whether or not we're in the right space, or how can we be more meaningful through that. So let's just jump right in, and we'll kind of go question by question. And
this is good, because finding meaning or purpose is so important to the human being, to humanity. God, who is an intelligent and purposeful being, has created us in his image to find purpose as well. And so when you feel like you lack purpose, sometimes it feels despairing. And so I think it's a great topic. It's one that's important, and it's not going to be something that any of the listeners have never thought about before. They're going like, oh, wow. Yeah, this is good.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a daily struggle for all of us, right?
Yes.
To really make sure that we find that meaning. And one of the things that I always think about kind of in this space is we have a choice, right, to find purpose and find meaning in the things that we do. Not everything in our life is going to be exciting and going to be all rosy, and right, we're faced with challenges, but we have a choice, I think, that we get to make every day, and almost every minute of every day, on whether or not we're going to choose to pursue that happiness and that meaningfulness, right?
Yeah,
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And one of the challenges today is that in our age of technology and information, there's so much distraction, so much white noise, and so we get distracted from the things that we think are the main thing, and then you can lose 20 to 30 minutes. I know just 2 days ago, I realized I lost 20 minutes just to social media, just looked up and said, oh my, and it was meaningless
Yeah.
in a sense.
Yep. And I think, and a lot of people can relate to that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a daily challenge too. So let's jump in here and we're going to pick off the first question that Kim posed in her article. And it's around being passionate with what you're doing. Am I passionate with what I'm doing? Do I love what I do? So when you think about that, what kind of things come to mind?
Well, I think that we can also often relate to the sense that we don't feel as passionate about something that we're doing as we would like to. And I think part of discerning whether or not we're in the right place, whether or not we're pursuing our passion, is understanding how God has wired us, how He's created us. We have this sometimes sense that we need to conform, and sometimes when we conform, we don't find ourselves exercising a sense of passion.
Okay.
At one point in my career before ministry, I thought, man, I'm not passionate about this.
Right.
And so I actually made a big decision, stepped out of it to do something I was passionate about.
Oh, wow.
And it was enriching.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's an interesting perspective. But, you know, and the bottom line is, I think, is that we have to understand, right, that where our talents are, where our strengths are, and make sure that we're doing everything that we can that in the pursuit of life that we're aligning our efforts that way.
Yeah. You know, I think sometimes we can feel like we lack passion when we lose the big picture. And within the scope of Scripture, we learn that God has created us purposefully. And when we can tap into that bigger story of God and our place in that story, then we can begin to see how we fit and how our job, our career, our vocation fits in that. And then we can begin to sense that passion to pursue it. It's sort of like knowing what we were created for.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say, and let me just throw it back at you a little bit, just make sure I'm hearing the right thing, is life is bigger than necessarily maybe the job that we have, right? And the job is kind of a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, that's
right.
right.
And when we take that larger perspective and understand who we are, why we're here, and how this part of it can create that impact or that passion, even outside of that single job or whatever.
Yeah, you think about working in a factory, for instance, for example, to make a small part of a bigger machine. And you might not be as excited until you find out that that small part actually is integral to the proper functioning of the big machine. So they should take you out and let you see the big picture so you get excited about your part in it.
That's cool. That's cool. That's a really good analogy. So that kind of dovetails well into the second question then. Does my current job or my current position provide an opportunity for me to live out my purpose in other ways?
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. And I thought of somebody who both you and I know, actually you just met recently, but Jim Holloway, Jim and Regina Holloway, who's a committed missionary to Central America. And he told us the story when we had dinner with him recently, that his job allows him the flexibility so he could pursue his passion of serving that community.
That's right. Yeah. And in fact, he would testify that that the Lord put him in a certain position to make him fruitful in this overseas missionary missions. Yeah.
So the job provides him the flexibility, the income, all the things that he needs in order to really pursue his passion in a completely different part of the world.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of neat because it doesn't. So that goes back to that broader perspective, right? Analogy that you just shared with us is that the job that you're in may not be the place where you're really excited about, but what opportunities is that providing you in order to pursue your passion?
Right. It may afford you a certain amount of flexibility each year to go and travel and do, like we know doctors that they love their practice of medicine, but they
Mhm.
especially like how it affords them the ability to go and minister to
Yeah.
less fortunate in a different place, in a
Right.
different world. Yeah.
Very similar. Very similar situation to what Jim
Yeah.
and Regina, his wife, are doing through Providing Hope Ministries. And so I really thought about that pretty long and hard as I was reading this article, is because we all get bogged down in our work.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine
Yeah.
even you do as a
Yeah.
pastor, right? You get bogged down in your work, and it's really hard, I think, to be on that level of happiness all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to take that step back and really understand what's the bigger picture here.
Right. Yeah. For instance, in any person's job, mine especially, I feel like I'm most effective in one aspect, but when I have to spread
Mhm.
myself out, I feel like I'm not as effective. So I want to get other people to take those things so I can find the meaningfulness
Stay in
in
the
that
sweet
one.
spot.
Yeah. In the sweet spot, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. All right. The third piece of, or the third question, I guess, that was posed is about service, right?
Yeah.
And I know this is a subject that's near and dear to your heart, but how are you serving others, and how is that impacting your ability to be, finding that meaningfulness
Yeah.
and developing that passion in your work?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you think about those that sing songs and the groups that harmonize.
Mm,
If you just heard that one person who's doing a certain part of the harmony by themselves, you're like, that's not very interesting.
right.
But then you hear all the voices together, you're like, wow, that's
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah.
And so, if we can see ourselves as not necessarily the melody, but harmonizing and the beauty of the big picture together, then we'll see our small part as a more meaningful contribution. Also, think of what Jesus said, the wisdom, leadership, genius of Jesus. He said, it is better to give than to receive.
Yeah.
And that's kind of contrary to our own instinct.
Sure.
I love receiving. I tell
Absolutely.
people, they have the 5 love languages. I have a 6th. Mine is gift receiving. but Jesus says it's better to give than to receive, because we see the joy in the outcome,
Yeah.
the way that we can minister. And many of us know that we go and we do something thinking that we're going to serve somebody, and then we are blessed because of what we
Right.
did, more so than maybe the one that we
Right.
thought. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Kim even pointed that out in her articles, that oftentimes when we have that focus of serving others, we get so much more out of that than we realize, and everybody wins in that situation.
Yeah, and even social media is a good example of that, because really, when I'm surfing social media, I want to fix,
Mm.
and it just doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of an indication that when I'm focused on myself, it's less meaningful than when I'm pouring myself out for others.
Yeah, this is a part of the article that I really reflected a little bit on one of your sermons from Ecclesiastes, and there was a note that I wrote in my Bible as I went back and reflected on that, and it was about selfishness, which is really the opposite of service, I think, is rather than being focused on others, you're focused on yourself. And the thing that I wrote in my Bible is when we focus on ourselves by being selfish, that often we cause harm to others.
Yeah.
And even what it's probably unintended.
That's right. Yeah. In the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon is talking about oppression, how oppression is common in a fallen world. And it's usually the result of others seeking sort of gain for themselves and not necessarily intending. And we can see it in the workplace, in industry. Sure. I've worked for people not in the ministry, but others outside of ministry, that you could tell that they were pushing me because they would get a bigger bonus.
Right.
And that's okay. We all want to be a team and contribute, but others get the sense that they're being used as
not
pawns.
genuine.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And it hurts. It drives them in unhealthy ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we can see that everybody wins, that's when we alleviate oppression. But we're caring about the whole and not just ourselves.
Yeah, and how much better is the world if we all have that mentality, right? Where we're going to lift each other up and do that.
Right.
And so it's so important, I think, in order, from the perspective of finding meaningfulness, is you've got to have that perspective of how can I help others through this process, and then it's going to just springboard us forward, I think, in that whole concept.
Yes.
And then the fourth question, and which was the final question that Ken posed in the article was about feeling fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
Do I feel fulfilled in my work?
Yeah. It's an honest appraisal that some might not feel that they can answer that in the affirmative. However, if we go back to our purpose and meaning, the reason God has fitted us where we're at, we can be where we don't think we want to be, but if we see that God has us there for a season, then we can find a sense of fulfillment in that, just knowing that, hey, and I've said, you remember me saying this during the sermon series, this doesn't mean you have to just say, okay, this is fatalistic, I'm going to be here forever. No, you can seek a different path, but be fruitful while God has you there. And then you'll have that sense of fulfillment that God's using me right where I'm at. It won't have to be forever. But yeah, it kind of comes back to that whole Colossians 3:23 that a lot of Christians will focus on. Whatever you do, work heartily as unto the Lord, not as unto men, knowing that it's from the Lord that you'll receive the reward. Or so we recognize that God is purposely having us where we're at. Doesn't have to be forever, but we're going to honor Him while we're there.
Wow, that's so good and so rich and so difficult.
It is. It is.
I got to tell you, Pastor, I struggle with that so much. And I hear every time I hear it, and I took notes on that sermon. I reflected on that part of it too as I was preparing for this, and I know I fail every day in that regard. But it's so important to be able to take that back to that broader perspective and know that I'm here for a reason. Right. Whether I'm going through a good time or a bad time or whatever that may be, God has me here for a reason. What am I going to get out of this? What am I going to learn out of this in order for me to be better in how I approach serving others or doing whatever? But man, that is so difficult to do.
It is, and you're not unique in recognizing that you fall short of that. And that's exactly why Solomon writes us this wisdom, because God knows that we all struggle with it. I struggle with it. And so he writes us this so that we would see, God has subjected all of our existences, all of our lives to a level of frustration so that we won't think that this is heaven on earth, that we're looking for a better country and we continue to press on knowing we're not home yet.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
very much.
A joy. Yeah,
it has been. And it's gone by so fast.
Yeah, wow.
So fast.
I know.
Like everything else this year, it's gone by so fast.
Yes.
But I've really appreciated this time, and I'm really glad that you were able to join me and share some of your thoughts. And I'm sure there's folks out there that will get some benefit from this as well.
Yeah, it's been meaningful for me too.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
Solomon, he kind of gives us a recurring final thought. The end of the matter is this: rejoice in the work of your hands, for God has given you the ability to work, and work is not it's precurse, and it is subjected to futility, but it's a good thing. And God has given you the ability to work and support yourself, support those that you love, contribute to others' lives, and so rejoice in that. And be content. Find contentment there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. Can't close it out any other way than that, for sure. So thank you again for joining me. Thank you to everyone out there for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time here on Our Community.